A furious woman, face red with anger, pointed a finger aggressively, her voice a venomous shout. It was a picture of uncontrolled rage, someone used to getting their way, no matter the cost. Then, a sudden shift. A calm, collected black couple stood side by side, smiling confidently in a completely different setting, a formal city council meeting. The contrast was stark, the implication clear. These two scenes were connected, and the connection was about to be explosive. This was a story of a homeowners association president who thought she held all the cards. She thought she could control her little kingdom with an iron fist, enforcing every rule, no matter how petty, and targeting anyone who dared to challenge her authority. She harassed a new family in the neighborhood, making their lives a living hell with constant complaints and thinly veiled threats. But she made one huge mistake. She picked on the wrong family. She had absolutely no idea who she was dealing with. And when she found out, it would be the most shocking, humiliating moment of her life. This was a story about prejudice, about the abuse of power, and about the ultimate comeuppance. Oakwood Estates was the kind of neighborhood that appeared on postcards. Perfect houses, each with a meticulously manicured lawn, lined the quiet, tree-lined streets. It was a place where neighbors prided themselves on their property values and their sense of community. It was, in short, the epitome of suburban bliss, or so it seemed. Beneath the veneer of tranquility, however, lay a subtle undercurrent of unease. The residents of Meadow Creek prided themselves on their close-knit community, but that closeness often came with a watchful and sometimes judgmental eye towards anyone who didn't quite fit the mold. David and Lisa Johnson were thrilled when they finally found their dream home in Oakwood Estates. David, a talented architect who had designed several prominent city buildings, appreciated the neighborhood's well-maintained aesthetic. Lisa, a dedicated pediatrician working at the city's main hospital, loved the idea of raising their two young children in such a seemingly safe and friendly environment. They were a successful, hard-working couple, excited to put down roots and become part of the community. They envisioned years of block parties, neighborhood barbecues, and watching their kids grow up playing with the other children on the street. They had no idea their dream was about to collide with a force of nature named Barbara Thompson. Barbara was the president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, a position she took very seriously. She wasn't just the president. She was the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood's standards, the enforcer of its rules, the keeper of its pristine image. She was a woman of a certain age, with perfectly coiffed hair, a perpetually disapproving expression, and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her hand. She patrolled the streets of Oakwood Estates like a hawk, her eyes scanning for any infraction, any deviation from the meticulously detailed HOA guidelines. A blade of grass out of place, a trash can left out too long, a child's toy straying onto the sidewalk. Nothing escaped Barbara's notice, and woe betide the resident who dared to cross her. She ruled her domain with an iron fist, cloaked in a veneer of polite but pointed passive aggression. The Johnsons, in their blissful ignorance, were about to enter her domain. The first violation notice arrived just a week after the Johnsons moved in. It was a crisp, official-looking document, neatly typed and enclosed in a plastic sleeve. The offense: their lawn was half an inch too high. David chuckled, assuming it was a joke, a standard welcome to the neighborhood prank. He mowed the lawn the next day, making sure to be extra precise. But the notices kept coming. The next one cited an incorrect color of mailbox flag. Apparently, the standard red flag was not the specific shade of red required by the HOA. David repainted the flag, feeling a growing sense of irritation. Then came a notice about children's toys left unattended in the yard. The toys in question, a brightly colored plastic ball and a small scooter, had been left out for a grand total of 15 minutes while Lisa took the kids inside for a snack. This time, David and Lisa exchanged worried glances. This wasn't a joke, it was harassment. "This is ridiculous," David exclaimed, crumpling the latest notice in his fist. "We're barely breaking any rules. These are such minor things." Lisa, ever the pragmatist, tried to remain calm. "I know, honey," she said, "but let's just try to comply. Maybe if we follow every single rule, no matter how silly, she'll leave us alone." They redoubled their efforts. They measured their lawn with a ruler. They consulted the HOA handbook for the precise dimensions and placement of every outdoor item. They became hyper-vigilant about their children's toys, whisking them away the moment they were finished playing. They were living in their dream home, but they felt like they were walking on eggshells. Despite their meticulous compliance, the violations continued, each one more petty and absurd than the last. A bird feeder deemed too large, a garden gnome declared inappropriate, a welcome mat that was not in keeping with the community aesthetic. It was a constant low-level barrage of criticism, designed to wear them down, to make them feel unwelcome. And then, the harassment escalated from passive-aggressive notices to direct confrontations. Barbara Thompson started showing up at their doorstep, clipboard in hand, a smug expression on her face. She'd point out infractions with a thinly veiled condescension, her words dripping with a subtle but unmistakable subtext. "We like to keep our community unified, you understand?" she said one afternoon, her eyes lingering on David's skin. "It's important to maintain standards." Another time, she cornered Lisa while she was gardening. "We have certain expectations here in Oakwood Estates," she said, her voice tight with disapproval. "It's important that everyone understands that." The message was clear. The Johnsons, despite their best efforts, didn't belong. Barbara was making their lives miserable, and she seemed to be enjoying it. The dream home was quickly becoming a source of constant stress and anxiety. The Johnsons were reaching their breaking point. The Johnsons were at their wits' end. They had tried everything to appease Barbara Thompson, but nothing worked. The constant harassment, the petty violations, the thinly veiled racism, it was all taking a toll. They were starting to feel unwelcome in their own home, in their own community. They even began to seriously discuss the possibility of moving, selling their dream home, and starting over somewhere else. One evening, as David and Lisa were sitting on their porch, looking dejected and defeated, friendly neighbor Sarah stopped by. Sarah lived across the street and had witnessed the Johnson struggles with the HOA President. She had always been warm and welcoming, offering a smile and a wave whenever they saw each other. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine sympathy. "Barbara is notorious for being difficult. She's driven other families out of the neighborhood with her ridiculous rules and her constant nitpicking." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We don't know what else to do. We've tried everything. We're even thinking about moving." Sarah's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Moving? You can't let her win. You have more power than you think." Lisa looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Sarah smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "You didn't know? You both have all sorts of connections with City Hall. David, you're the architect who designed the new City Hall annex and the library downtown. Everyone is talking about them. And Lisa, you're one of the top pediatricians at City Hospital. You volunteer on medical boards. You both have friends on the city council. You were even at the mayor's fundraising gala last month, weren't you?" A wave of realization washed over David and Lisa. They had been so focused on trying to appease Barbara, on trying to fit into this small, insular world of Oakwood Estates, that they had completely forgotten about their own influence, their own connections within the larger city community. They had been playing Barbara's game, on her turf, according to her rules. They hadn't even considered fighting back. A spark of hope flickered in Lisa's eyes. "You're right, Sarah," she said, a new determination hardening her voice. "We do have power. We've been so focused on surviving that we forgot how to fight." David nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "We've been playing defense this whole time. It's time to go on offense." The weight on their shoulders seemed to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just victims anymore. They were empowered. And Barbara Thompson had no idea what was coming. The city council meeting was held in a large formal chamber, the very building David had helped design. Usually these meetings were sparsely attended, dealing with routine city matters. But tonight, the room was buzzing with a quiet anticipation. Word had spread about the Johnsons' intention to address the council, and a number of residents from Oakwood Estates, as well as other interested citizens, had come to witness the showdown. David and Lisa sat near the front, looking calm and composed, a stark contrast to their earlier despair. They had spent the past few days gathering evidence, documenting the HOA violations, and preparing their statement. They were ready. Barbara Thompson was also present, sitting on the opposite side of the room, her usual smug expression firmly in place. She was there to request additional funding for the Oakwood Estates community garden, a project she considered her personal masterpiece. She had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. As the meeting progressed, Barbara confidently approached the podium, clipboard in hand, and launched into her presentation. She spoke about the importance of maintaining property values, of upholding community standards, and of ensuring that Oakwood Estates remained a desirable place to live. She painted a picture of a harmonious community, a testament to her leadership and her unwavering dedication to the rules. And that's why, she concluded, her voice filled with self-importance. We need additional funding for the Oakwood Estates community garden. It's essential for maintaining our aesthetic appeal and, of course, our community standards. She smiled smugly, expecting the usual rubber stamp approval from the council. Councilmember Ramirez, a woman known for her sharp intellect and her commitment to social justice, cleared her throat. "Thank you, Ms. Thompson," she said, her tone neutral. "Now, we have a couple of other residents who'd like to address the council, David and Lisa Johnson." A ripple of surprise went through the room. Barbara's smile faltered. She looked at the Johnsons, a flicker of confusion and perhaps a hint of unease crossing her face. David and Lisa stood and approached the podium, their steps measured and confident. They stood in stark contrast to Barbara, their demeanor radiating a quiet strength that commanded attention. "Good evening, council members," David began, his voice calm and articulate. "We're here tonight to raise a concern about the overzealous enforcement of HOA rules in Oakwood Estates. Specifically, we believe that some residents, including ourselves, are being unfairly targeted." Lisa continued, her voice clear and steady. "We've received numerous violation notices for incredibly minor infractions, things like the height of our grass, the color of our mailbox flag, and the temporary placement of children's toys in our own yard. Meanwhile, we've observed other residents committing similar or even more significant infractions without any consequences. We believe this is discriminatory, and we have evidence to support our claim." She proceeded to present a series of photographs and documents, meticulously detailing the violations they had received, alongside examples of similar violations by other residents that had been ignored. The evidence was clear, concise, and damning. Barbara, her face turning increasingly red, tried to interrupt. "This is outrageous. These are lies. I treat everyone fairly." But Councilmember Jackson, a stern-faced man with a reputation for fairness, silenced her with a raised hand. "Ms. Thompson, you will have your chance to respond. But we will hear from the Johnsons first." He had known David for years and implicitly trusted his word. He noticed Barbara attempt to make eye contact. Barbara, realizing an ally was present, attempted to regain control. "James, I can explain," she started, trying to use familiarity. Councilmember Jackson cut her off, his tone even sharper this time. "Ms. Thompson, Councilmember Jackson to you, and I suggest you remain silent until it's your turn to speak. Your behavior is bordering on contempt. We've received multiple complaints about your conduct as HOA President, not just from the Johnsons. This is a serious matter." The room was now completely silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Barbara's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and the Johnsons were just getting started. The tables had turned, and the power dynamic in the room had shifted dramatically. As the council members listened intently to David and Lisa's presentation, their expressions growing increasingly serious, Barbara Thompson sat fuming, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. She had expected to be praised for her dedication to Oakwood Estates, not to be publicly accused of discrimination. She still believed she could control the situation, that her position as HOA President gave her some inherent authority. She was wrong. Councilmember Ramirez, after reviewing the evidence presented by the Johnsons, turned to Barbara, her voice calm but firm. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "these are serious allegations. Do you have any explanation for the discrepancies in rule enforcement that the Johnsons have documented?" Barbara, flustered and indignant, sputtered, I treat everyone equally. These are just isolated incidents, taken out of context." Councilmember Lee, a longtime friend of Lisa's, leaned forward. "Ms. Thompson," he said, "are you aware of who Mr. and Dr. Johnson are in relation to this city?" The question hung in the air, a loaded silence descending over the room. Barbara looked confused, her eyes darting between the council members and the Johnsons. I know they're residents of Oakwood Estates," she stammered, her voice losing its usual confidence. Councilmember Jackson then delivered the final blow, his words dropping like stones into the quiet room. "Ms. Thompson, Mr. Johnson is the architect who designed this very building, the City Hall Annex, as well as the award-winning Central Library downtown. He's a highly respected member of this community, and his firm has contributed significantly to the city's development." He paused, letting the information sink in before continuing. "And Dr. Johnson is a leading pediatrician at City Hospital, serving countless families in our community. She volunteers her time on numerous medical boards and committees, dedicating her life to the health and well-being of our children." The revelation hit Barbara like a physical blow. Her face, already flushed with anger, turned a ghastly shade of white. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, completely stunned and disoriented. The smug, self-assured HOA president had vanished, replaced by a woman who had just realized she had made a colossal, career-ending mistake. She had spent weeks harassing, belittling, and discriminating against two of the most influential and respected members of the entire city. She had treated them like insignificant annoyances, unaware that they held positions of power far exceeding her own petty domain. Her arrogance, her prejudice, her blind adherence to her own little kingdom of rules had led her to this moment of utter humiliation. The tables hadn't just turned, they had flipped completely, leaving her crushed beneath their weight. The city council didn't waste any time. Immediately following the meeting, they launched a formal investigation into the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, with a specific focus on Barbara Thompson's leadership and the numerous complaints against her. Councilmember Ramirez, taking the lead, assured the Johnsons that their concerns would be taken seriously and that justice would be served. The investigation moved swiftly. City officials reviewed HOA records, interviewed residents, and examined the evidence presented by David and Lisa. The findings were damning. It wasn't just the Johnsons. Barbara had a long history of abusing her power, of selectively enforcing rules, and of targeting residents she deemed undesirable. The news of the investigation spread quickly through Oakwood Estates. Residents who had previously been too afraid to speak out, fearing Barbara's retaliation, now felt emboldened to come forward. They shared their own stories of harassment, of petty violations, of feeling intimidated and unwelcome in their own homes. One resident recounted how Barbara had fined her for having the wrong kind of flowers in her window boxes. Another described how Barbara had repeatedly complained about the noise from his children's birthday parties, even though they ended well before the HOA's designated quiet hours. A third resident, a single mother, revealed that Barbara had threatened to report her to Child Protective Services for leaving her children unattended in her own fenced backyard for a few minutes. The stories painted a picture of a woman drunk on power, using her position to control and intimidate those around her. The investigation confirmed what the Johnsons had suspected all along. Barbara Thompson's reign of terror had been going on for far too long, and it was finally coming to an end. Within weeks, the city council had gathered enough evidence to take decisive action. They issued a formal reprimand to the Oakwood Estates HOA, demanding immediate reforms and threatening to dissolve the association altogether if changes weren't made. And then came the final blow for Barbara. At a special meeting of the Oakwood Estates HOA, called at the insistence of the city council, a vote was held to remove her from her position as president. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor of her removal. Barbara Thompson, the once feared and all-powerful ruler of her little kingdom, was dethroned. Her reign of terror was over. She left the meeting in disgrace, her head hung low, the smugness and arrogance completely gone, replaced by the bitter taste of defeat. With Barbara Thompson gone, a new era began in Oakwood Estates. The atmosphere shifted, tension dissipated, and a sense of relief and cautious optimism settled over the community. The constant fear of petty violations, of arbitrary enforcement, of Barbara's ever-watchful eye, was gone. New leadership was elected to the HOA, residents who promised a more fair, more transparent, and more inclusive approach. The ridiculous rules were revised, the focus shifted from strict compliance to fostering a genuine sense of community. Neighbors who had previously avoided each other started to connect, to share stories, to offer support. The Johnsons, once on the verge of leaving their dream home, now felt a renewed sense of belonging. They were no longer the targets of harassment. They were respected members of the community, their voices heard, their contributions valued. They watched their children play freely in their yard, no longer worried about a stray toy or a moment of laughter triggering another absurd violation notice. The change wasn't instantaneous, of course. Old habits and ingrained prejudices don't disappear overnight. But the seeds of change had been planted, and there was a growing sense of hope that Oakwood Estates could become the welcoming, inclusive community it had always aspired to be. The Johnson story became a local legend, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage can have a profound impact. They had stood up to a bully, challenged a system of abuse, and in doing so, had helped to create a better future for themselves and for their neighbors. It was a testament to the power of community, the importance of speaking out against injustice, and the enduring truth that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, positive change is always possible. And as for Barbara, she was left alone to consider her actions and her prejudice. Please remember to share, like, and subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to turn on post notifications to be among the first to watch our videos. See you in the next video.